Check. Yeah. It says, yeah.
What?
And we're live. It's The Human Condition. I'm Vince Orlando.
I'm Sean Davis.
And you can call me Sniffles again. My head's starting to clear up. Just moved out of the house, out of the black mold infested house. I'm into the new space, going on my 4th day now. I can kind of breathe again. Head's getting a little clearer. It's a beautiful thing. How you been?
Doing good.
Yeah?
Everything's good.
On that spiritual game?
Sometimes.
Sometimes?
You know.
Yeah.
Anger been creeping up a little bit here and there, but it's all mostly job related. So, you know, when that happens, you just got to make adjustments.
Right.
And that's all there is to it.
Well, that's actually a good segue into the episode. We're waiting on we're not waiting on Steve, but we're expecting him. So he may mosey in a little bit late. Traffic's a killer out there. But the segue on anger into today's episode on happiness.
Yeah.
And whether our constant drive to be happy actually perpetuates suffering. And I know from experience, from my experience, and I can only speak from that a constant drive to be happy, which I can't fault anybody because I like to be happy. It feels good to be happy, right? But it's not possible. You just can't be happy all the time. And if you were happy all the time, how would you know you were happy all the time? Because you wouldn't know what suffering was. So, in my opinion, yes, that constant need to be happy, which leads to our search for instant gratification, perpetuates suffering, in my opinion, and from my experience. What do you think?
I am happy 24/7. When I got money in the bank account, I don't have to go to work.
Gotta be some other things that mess
I'm
with you.
telling you, working, I feel like it's a system. I feel that it fucks people up. You know, my aunt passed in like 2007 and left me a little chunk change. And I remember, I started my own day trading business. But for the most part, like, I did that, and I'd get up 9:30, 10 o'clock, watch the stock market. I'd hit the noontime meeting. I'd go lift. I'd hit, like, the evening meeting and, like, sponsor a shit ton of dudes. I didn't have to answer to anyone.
Did you have a girlfriend? Wife?
Nope.
Well, that'll make you happy too sometimes. You know what I mean? Because you don't have those fights.
You know,
but did you get lonely sometimes?
No, man. Like, I don't know. Someone asked me that one time. Like, the presence of God, my God, is always there. I can always feel connected. It's always there. It's like I can't really put it into words, but I'll tell you, it's like if someone's ever relapsed, there's like a feeling you get, and it's like, I don't know what it is, but it's like a machete just cuts through like the biggest power cord, and you're no longer like connected to the power. Like, that's like,
You don't feel connected.
I don't feel connected. Like, especially like alcohol, like, it won't be the first drink, and it won't be like the third or the fourth. It'll be like when I get drunk, when I wake up the next day, that feeling is there, like the connected feeling. But I walk like, and I don't know how you develop it once you relapse, because I have had to redevelop it a couple times. But there's just like a overriding power sense, love feeling that never really goes away.
But is that happiness though? Because for me,
It's not. You asked if I got lonely. You said, like, do you ever get lonely? And I really don't. And, you know, another thing my sponsor said, like, we were hunting a couple weeks ago, and he said, when you're perfectly fine in your own skin, you rarely, and you enjoy your own company, you don't really get lonely.
See, loneliness is an emotion. It's an exterior feeling. It's not an interior. I like solitude. I love solitude. I appreciate solitude. I also like the company of other people. When I'm triggered, when the PTSD goes deep, right, and the brain starts to buzz, and I start getting this weird feeling. It's almost like I've been drinking, right? It's like I'm drunk. It's like I'm high or something. My head just buzzes, and then I start to instinctively seek escape. But the first thing I get is this deep, deep feeling of loneliness. Now, when I'm alone and my brain is functioning properly, I don't feel that loneliness in spurts. In spurts, I'll get it, and I know that it's my subconscious. I know that it's an emotion playing tricks on me because I am connected. But I don't think that connection is happiness. You can be happy, but because for the most part, I would say that I'm happy too. But I don't like when my kids aren't with me, you know. And sometimes I don't like when they're with me. Sometimes they drive me nuts, and sometimes that'll make me unhappy, right? But I'm still content. I'm still very much content with who I am and my life.
Do you remember the days of not being content?
Yes.
You remember
absolutely.
the days of like waking up to a drink, doing a couple rails, not having a job, and being like, what the fuck am I going to do now?
I remember lots of days like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And your self-worth is like lower than anything else. Probably got a lot of borderline fucking insanity going on, and you've lost a lot of hope. You're not even seeking any validation at this point because you know how fucked up you are. Like, I remember those days, and that was like an unhappy time. And there's something about life where you're gonna go through like periods of like, you may not necessarily consciously say I'm happy, but there's an overriding current or frequency or vibration of happiness. But you might have like things going on. You might be, you know, business might be requiring more from you. You'll have the kids at the same time. You know, the service work that you do might be calling now. There's a lot going on at that particular.
Which can stress you out.
Right, but the thing
you
is,
feel unhappy.
but the thing is, you're still happy.
See, that's where I think we're saying the same things, but happiness is an emotion like love is an emotion. Unconditional love isn't an emotion. It's ever present. In the same way the connection with my children is ever present, although at times they'll make me unhappy with their behavior and my stress levels. And I'm still content, right? And as long as I don't give in to this feeling, this emotion, this fleeting emotion of unhappiness at the time, as long as I don't give in to that and let it carry me, then I can pull myself out of it as long as I'm content. If I'm comfortable in my skin, like you said. Now, the same thing can be said is if I'm happy, I can fall into the trap of always wanting to be happy. So when something throws me, like my kids throw me, or somebody close to me dies, or something, when my happiness gets challenged, now it can turn into suffering because I'm relying on this emotion that's fleeting. And happiness is fleeting. Unhappiness is fleeting. Love is fleeting. Those things come and they go. They're not ever present, in my opinion. But contentment, connection, compassion, those things are ever present. You know, you might not exhibit compassion, but there's an innate. We talked about this in a couple episodes ago about this innate sense of being compassionate. It's the driving force in what it is to be human.
But don't you think that comes from like a love-centered spot?
Unconditional love. Yeah, unconditional love. I don't think, because love is tricky too. Love is an emotion, and that's why people get so batshit crazy. You said you weren't lonely not being in a relationship. Well, that's because you didn't need the superficial feeling of love. Unconditional love is a different thing. There's a handful of people in my life that I love unconditionally, and in fact, I try to love most people unconditionally. I don't need them with me all the time to not to feel fulfilled in that unconditional love. You know, if I did, well, now I start to think that, well, maybe it's not real because I'm relying on the endorphins that come from this this emotion of happiness. You know, and that's why we're talking about it in the way that we are, because I think it can be misconstrued as something that's permanent if you think about happiness as anything other than an emotion that's fleeting, right? And I don't know if you agree with that, but that's and I know that I can't constantly be happy. I can constantly be grounded. I can get thrown and I can come back to my center as long as I don't feed into the emotion. But the same thing can be said for happiness too. If I feed too much into the happiness, of course I'm always going to want it to be there. It just feels better. It just does. Like, you know, and you'll ask people a lot of times, what's your goal? What do you want to do? And like, I just want to be happy. Well, it's not possible all the time. In the way that,
because like you got life is gonna be life, but
what if somebody, so in that time period, what if your father had passed? That's gonna do something to you.
yeah, but
Even if you are centered, you're gonna feel that.
true. But I know that that pain is temporary,
Right.
you know, and you move on, you know, and life goes on.
And you can find contentment in that.
Yeah,
I can't find happiness in that. Maybe you can. And if you can, I want to know that secret, because I can find contentment. So I can alleviate suffering by knowing what you just said, by knowing that this is fleeting, this pain is fleeting, that life is impermanent, that everybody at some point is going to leave us or will leave them, whether permanently or otherwise. It's just going to happen. Now, does it make the pain not happen, knowing that? No, I'm still going to suffer. Not suffer. I'm still going to hurt.
pain is inevitable.
That's the whole point.
Suffering is optional.
Right, and that's the whole point. Can you be happiness and happy and in pain at the same time? I don't believe you can, but I do think you can be content and in pain.
And let's just say, like, you know, talk about someone who's dying of cancer, who's suffering a shit ton
Physically,
and their daughter, you know, they pass away, and their daughter is going to feel happy because they're no longer suffering and paying for the void that they're gone.
right.
You know, and that's normal, and that can happen,
And you got them both,
and you have them both.
right? And
You know,
and you accept it
and you do.
if your mind is there.
I mean, I don't know. Death is always.
That's tricky.
It never. It bothered me when I was young, and then you just know that, like, this is part of being in human form, is that, you know, the human flesh moves on and makes a transition, and that's part of being here on the planet. Now, that doesn't make it any easier, but I found that once I could understand that, that was a little bit better. The thing that sucks, though, is like the unexpected deaths, like, you know, the ones that hit close to home, the ones that are tragic, and they all have a different level of pain and sadness. That, yeah, you're not going to be happy when, you know, 13-year-old kid gets hit by a car on a bike.
No.
You know, it's tragic. You know,
And if you are, there's something wrong.
right, you know,
You know?
and especially if that kid was close to you, you're gonna have a lot of deep-rooted, you know, probably some justifiable resentment and some pain and stuff, and that might hurt for a lifetime when you think about it.
And yeah, you'll have to you will have to consciously combat that.
Right.
And the thing is, you're much further along spiritually than most, so it's easier for us. it's just we understand things at a different level than I think a lot of people do, and we talk about impermanence, and that's what that is. You realize life is fleeting. There's nothing permanent. We can go back to our spiritual principles, our grounding, and we can find contentment, and we can alleviate the suffering. We can't. The pain's going to happen, just like happiness is going to happen. Even if I don't want to be happy, there's times where the kids have, pissed me off. I'll use them as an example. I don't want to be happy when they say something that's cute. In those moments, I want to remain the disciplinarian, but I'll have to walk out of the room and do my little laugh and then come back in. I can't hide. It's an emotion though. It's coming. It's going.
Yeah. How we doing today?
All right, sorry.
It's all right.
A bit late. We've been doing this 7:30 thing so much that I thought it was 6:30 that we started.
What's 7:30? Oh, the meetings. Yeah. Hey,
So I thought I was on time, but apparently not. That's my fault.
That's all right.
But going to what you were just talking about, I was thinking about this on my drive over. There's two different types of happiness, right? There's the chemical happiness that your brain puts out there. Your what is it, serotonin? Dopamine. Right, that's your happiness.
I have the dope.
But there's a few different ways to trigger it.
Oh, yeah,
Drugs are
there's a
one
lot-
of it.
Drugs are one,
You can
right?
trigger it very
Drugs,
negatively.
A lot of different things, like sometimes a sparkling water in the middle of the summer will fucking trigger some goddamn dopamine.
And that's a positive way to
Yeah.
live, right? But there's very negative ways. So and that goes back to the point to where it's so happiness. It comes and goes. It's fleeting. Takes many different forms. I don't believe that it's a healthy aspiration because it is also impermanent and only an emotion. So, the only happiness I know is an emotion is chemical. Now, there's a deep-seated joy that you have when you have your spiritual center on and you're content in your own skin, which is way different than happiness. Because I can feel pain and get back to my center, and I cannot suffer. I can't, under any circumstance, unless I'm in denial, offset pain, like the pain of somebody close dying or a 13-year-old kid that gets hit by a car. It's going to happen.
Right. And so,
Also an emotion, chemical.
I'll tell you, so I've gone all in on the belief that we will all meet again.
I don't think we ever leave each other, but it's the same.
You know what I
concept,
mean? Like when we leave the human form and our soul makes its homecoming, I truly have gone all in. All my chips that I've Texas Hold'em, I'm all in on the idea that we all meet again.
I would say that we're one, but yeah, I get what you're saying.
So
We're not separate anyway.
So a lot of times I can find peace in that, knowing that. So when someone leaves me, or someone passes, the pain will be there, but there's that piece of it that we'll meet again, and it's all going to be fine, and it's all going to work out. And in the pain, you have to find the peace, and that's like a time thing,
You have to work for it.
Yeah, you have, grief and loss is like that 7 stages of I don't know about all that. I've seen it, and I know
The
some
7
people.
stages of grief.
Yeah.
It's not true.
Yeah. So I think like every human being has their own DNA code, and I think we all have a different code for the process of how we handle those things. And we all have to develop our own code.
Definitely environmental. You know what I mean?
Right.
Which DNA is environmental. So we watch how our parents handle it. Is your parents? So, as Steve was talking about, well, I want to get back to what your second form of happiness was, but everything's environmental, man. And epigenetics proves that when you change your thinking, you can physically alter your DNA. It's not permanent. It's not permanent. It's not what they used to think it was. It's proven now that you can alter your DNA with change of environment, change of thinking. So, you know, if you grow up in an environment where the parents are fighting all the damn time, people that fight all the time are very much attached to their emotions. They're reactive, they're not responsive, right? So if you see that consistently, you have no choice but to be coded that way. And most of us are, because most of our parents didn't have the knowledge that we have access to when we were kids, right? And our kids now, I mean, they're so much further evolved than we ever were, and as it pertains to access to new knowledge and new ways to think. So their coding isn't as strong. It's still strong, but they have more opportunities to alter that. So you're right. I mean, what you see is what you're going to do, and then you got to work. You got to suffer some kind of trauma, typically. That's going to make you do a self evaluation. You have to suffer enough to where you say, something I'm doing is not right. You know, something I'm doing is not right. I realized that I was one of those people. If you ask what I wanted, I just wanted to be happy all the damn time. And I don't think that's unreasonable. I know it's not reasonable, but I don't think it's, before you know that, I don't think it's,
No, it's a real default setting. Like, I really like when I'm happy.
I
I
love
would
being
love to be happy all the time.
right. I wouldn't. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want to be happy all the time because I understand, like you said, in these spiritual concepts that, well, if I don't know what pain is, there is no happiness. Just take me back to the oneness that you're talking about, because that's all beautiful, right? There's no questions. You talked about the DMT experiences and the near death experiences that I've had. Peak experience when my children were born. Meditation sometimes when I go transcendental. I don't have any questions. I don't ponder the meaning of life. I just know. Like I just know. That's that oneness. So you know, it makes me appreciate the human condition a little bit more, because I get to feel pain and I get to find ways to combat that, and by doing that, I think that's the whole purpose. Like, I think we evolve God is, whatever the universe is, when we transcend the pain. That's where the money is for me. You know what I mean? That's the good shit. That's where, and I get excited right now just thinking about it. My hair stands, knowing the things that I still need to transcend, but the things that I have and you have, like, that gets me excited. Like, there's a deep seated curiosity and joy. It's a real joy in that I get to experience these things. Now, when I'm stressed, like I've been this past week, I've been sick for over a month, moved out of my house under duress, love the house, can't seem to get happy in the space completely yet, because I'm still very much rattled by the whole experience. But I have my center to fall back on, right? I could very easily, this could have, 5 years ago, this might have pushed me off the deep end. I might be in a pool of my own vomit right now. You know what I mean? Just poor me, poor me, poor me, while people are looking at my life from an external standpoint, wondering what the fuck I'm crying about. I very much, that's the feeling I was talking about. I very much am in tune with, if I weren't where I was right now, I would probably be there. I'd be in the abyss, and then I'd be, you know, 3 weeks in the hole, and then trying to figure my life out again, feeling that disconnection, that alienation, that loneliness, that deep sense of hopelessness. That's where I'd be. So I've felt pain this week. I felt pain with the sickness. I felt pain with the circumstances.
Yeah,
But I haven't had to suffer.
I'd love that. You know, like the adrenaline of not knowing what the fuck to do. Like, I really thrive on that shit.
Like uncertainty.
Yeah.
I like uncertainty. I like when I'm forced to do shit.
So, like, let's say I was in your situation, like I just get, like, I get excited inside just thinking about, like, boxing everything up, getting the movers, and, like, you know,
By choice.
having to unload that shit, and, like, you know, and then the having a new place to live always excited me. You know, where am I gonna put? You know, where am I gonna pray? Where's the altar? Where's the TV going? You know, like, how's the backyard look? You know, all that stuff. Like, there's nothing more exciting to me than, like, moving into a new place, and just, you know, like, I know that the sleep kind of sucks for, like, about 2 or 3 days, but, like, especially if you move in somewhere cool,
Which I did, but it was under duress. You know, I if it would, I've wanted to move for a long time because I just knew we outgrew the space, but I didn't want to be forced out just before Christmas. You know what I mean? With all the, now it's putting the lights up and the tree up has become a second priority to getting out of boxes. But I agree, I like excitement, but I moved under duress, and I just know that the duress, if I wasn't where I am right now, it could have spun me. Could have spun me in a different direction because I would have been attached to these temporary feelings of sadness, to stress, in the same way I can get attached to the happiness and want that to stay forever.
And that
That's
right
what an
there,
addict does.
Just hearing this story, because I know the things that you're going through right now, it sucks to move, especially when you're being forced to. But in the context of happiness, I think it kind of points out that happiness is a really hard thing to nail down. The more that you think about it, the more that it moves away. For example, like in your case, you were really happy where you were. Well, you were okay with where you were. You liked your house. It felt good to be there. You didn't feel like moving.
I didn't feel like moving. That was lazy.
Yeah.
Right away.
That was lazy.
Or is it contentment?
I did
temporarily.
all the time. Yeah, because it wasn't bad, but for about 2 years I've been saying I got to get out of here. And then I would think about the thought of moving. I'd be like, I don't have time. I'm not doing it. So it's good.
Your
It's
God
honestly,
made you move. Your
yeah.
God made you move.
and it's honestly good. But the duress thing, the fact that well, we had to get really really sick to actually do an air quality test, and and it forced us out of there right before Christmas. But yeah, not to cut you off, but yeah, I could have stayed there another couple months and been okay with it. Absolutely okay. I could have stayed through the holiday. It sucked having to climb my tree and take the lights down because I left them up every year because I'm just lazy like that. You know what I mean? I can just plug those fuckers in and put the blow up things out in the front yard. I'm like, God damn it! Me and the kids are out there freezing, ripping the lights down, and stupid stuff.
Yeah.
But again, nothing that. But I know, I just know how that could have rattled me.
Now, see all the smiling and the joking that you're doing right now?
Yeah.
Was that happiness?
That's happiness. Yeah, because I.
You can
Seems
smile
like you're
about
pretty damn
tribulation.
happy about having to be forced out of your house.
But I'm not. But I was happy talking about it right there because I'm just thinking about that moment in the tree. Now I'm like, oh, that was actually kind of funny. There's nothing really to stress about that. You know what I mean? Because I think about it now. Me and the kids will remember it. Out there moving, the way that we did.
Yeah.
It we'll come back to it. In the moment, shitty. You know what I mean? So I'm not going to get attached to the happiness that I feel right now. I like that feeling better than the alternative, but I do know that that's fleeting like everything else.
And I think all of us know like that laughing and everything, it's great while it lasts, but that cannot be permanent.
It gives us something to aspire to, right? Not
Whether that's incorrect or not, because you might aspire to that, but like we were saying when we were younger, we thought, yeah, I want to be like that all the time.
All the
But
time.
You can't be.
Right.
It's physically impossible.
and that leads to
you
addiction.
run out of dopamine.
Right, and that's one of the big problems that addicts have is their inability to delay gratification, right? And gratification is happiness. When you're gratified, you're happy, but you can't be gratified all the time. There's real life that you need to navigate through, and the addict brain will think, well, fuck, why can't I feel? And it's because you're disconnected. Really, that's all addiction is you're disconnected. You feel disconnected. And you're trying to alleviate that feeling of disconnection by whatever means necessary. So you get that first drink, you get that first drug, you have sex with that first woman or whoever, and or you get that pet. You know what I mean? There's so many different things that can pull you in that direction of I want to feel this all the time, and then it can become a compulsion if you get caught in the trap of believing that happiness is it's. What's your second form of happiness? Because I'm curious to know what that is. Because all I know it as, in my understanding, is that dopamine fix. It is this instant thing. I love my kids unconditionally. That'll never change. They piss me off sometimes.
Right.
And it's okay to be pissed off. That they're not going to make me happy all the time. I'm not going to make them happy all the time. Equally. And I can get caught in the trap of thinking I need to make everybody happy all the time. You fucking can't. You can't do that. But you can get caught in the trap of believing that's your responsibility. Why? Because you told you're not good when you're a kid. because your parents make you think that if you don't perform in this way, you're going to make me unhappy. And so we get caught in the trap of trying to make our parents happy all the time. And it starts there.
Mm-hmm.
And then we assume these roles. And it's a dangerous, dangerous trap. And I think it's one that everybody is accustomed to, unless you grow up in India or Tibet in a monastery and you're just taught the middle way, what is what the Buddhists would say, the middle way.
Or I don't know, some I think parents are good at teaching kids that the kids can't be responsible for how others feel.
It's important to do that.
You know,
They don't.
it's like it's big now. You know, I think a lot of that's changed, you know, from when we were growing up. Like, I think a lot of parents have a little bit more better angle on that codependent stuff and owning your feelings and being able to recognize that you're not responsible for someone else's happiness and things of that nature.
It's better.
Yeah, I think social media helps out with that. You know, the little memes that go back and forth with the little spiritual nuggets or little life lessons, or get on Imager or something like that, and you see one of those pictures, and you read the comments, you run into some pretty deep people that are able to get a really complex idea across in 80 characters, 90 characters. Like, wow. And I think a lot of parents are on social media these days, and they see, they start asking the questions, like, am I doing everything that's right? Or am I stuck in a trap, like you were saying?
They make you think. Well, that's why I like to post something. I try to do it daily. If I see something that makes me think, why would I not want to share that? Because it might make somebody else think. It might make somebody else think, get off your high horse, quit being sanctimonious. It can make I don't care. But I think it's important for us to share those things, because their thoughts are like emotions too. They're fleeting. But if we're not thinking, if we're not in contemplation, we're really mechanical.
That goes on to my second type of happiness. Because I think the first is the chemical, right? You get your dopamine fix. That makes you feel happiness. And that can be given from a chocolate bar. That can be given from getting a present or doing something right, doing a good job. We all know the things, right?
Yeah.
The second one is what you were getting to, is like there's this sort of X factor. And I think it's the spiritual side of us, where we can feel good from something like meditation, or feel good from sitting down and thinking about a question and getting an answer, or figuring out a new answer or a new way. And I don't think that's a dopamine hit. I think that feels a lot different.
That's more of the content. That's transcendence. When you find a new answer to
Like
a
a
question.
tickle of transcendence, even.
What a psychologist, what Maslow would say, a peak experience, right? You get these in life is strewn together by these peak experiences. And the trap of the peak experience, especially for the addictive mind, is that you believe you can have that all the time. So in the Buddhist tradition, alleviating suffering doesn't mean you don't feel pain. Like we were talking about earlier, pain's inevitable. It just means you don't have to suffer through the pain.
Roll with the punches.
You can be Viktor Frankl in a concentration. Now, I always go back to that. Viktor Frankl in a concentration camp, and in that somehow you can find meaning. You can find meaning. Now, it doesn't mean that you don't wake up scared for your life. Or maybe you're not scared for your life. Maybe he wasn't scared. Maybe he accepted the fact that today could be my last.
You just get used to it.
Today could be my last.
Yeah.
Right. It is what it is.
Every day could be my last day.
Right. And that's from where we sit. That's scary as shit to think that.
But it's the same for us. It's just that we don't think about it like that.
We're not in that situation.
True. But, I think a lot of people believe that life is guaranteed.
Right. You're not supposed to have cancer.
Well, you take it for granted, right? Because you made it to here. Right. So why wouldn't the rest of it be exactly like the first 40 years or the first 10 years?
I don't want that. You want that? I don't want it to be like my first 40.
Oh,
if it's like my first
that.
40, kill me now.
Yeah.
Just get that shit over with. And not saying it was all bad, but there was some extreme suffering that got me to a place to where I don't have to suffer anymore. And it's not to say that I don't sometimes still, but I have to.
Got you
I have
thinking
the tools.
about it.
It made me think about it because the suffering got to be so great that there had to be another way. And I think that's what you're
suffer
talking
so
about.
long, you're like, man, I just want something else.
Something. Give me
Yeah.
something. Give me something. And the drugs and alcohol don't work. Sex don't work. The gym, that don't work anymore. You know, when I first got out to Hollywood and I started booking roles and shit, and I thought this was it. And I can't even explain to you how empty I felt. And I remember the premiere for Life Goes On. And that whole process of producing my first film and having to carry it as the lead and writing it and just all these different hats that I wore. It's an extremely stressful process, but there was very peak moments throughout that. And so we get to the end game, and I remember standing on the stage, and I'm given, then you go up after the film, or maybe it was before, I can't remember. I remember Rube Jude was emceeing it, so it was a great night. 1,100 people there, the red carpet, all that shit, and it was my first starring role, and we're premiering it in my hometown, and it had already become a little bit of a cult classic in Detroit, and I'm to for what I had aspired to when I moved out to Hollywood and all that, I thought, this is it. This is it. I remember sitting in the body shop. I'm not going to say his name. He's an A-lister, and I'm not like he's listening to the podcast right now. But I remember sitting there doing cocaine off strippers' asses at the body shop, and I'm thinking, this is it. This is what I've always aspired to. And I'll tell you guys who it was.
I've arrived.
You know what I mean? Like, this is it. This is, and I'm a young guy. I'm in my 20s, and this guy had just done the biggest movie in the world, and not a care in the world. But I remember looking into his eyes. And this is all hindsight, but I remember looking into his eyes, and they were empty. You know what I mean? They were, and he had just become probably the biggest A-lister of all time at that time. And that's what I wanted. And I'm sitting here with him, and we have access to the women, and him more than me, but you know what I mean? But they're there, and they're surrounding, and this is it. And for me, coming from this poor environment, and that's all I wanted. And I remember that moment too, and it felt the same looking into his eyes before I left. And they shut the door behind me and left him in there with after closing time with all the strippers and his 4 boys, and I was with my girlfriend at the time actually, and we left. And I remember that in hindsight, but I remember getting that same feeling, this emptiness, when I'm standing on stage and I'm talking about going full circle, and I'm just saying the right words at the right time, right? Because it felt like that's what I was supposed to say, but I really felt in this room full of people that were there to see me and what I'd accomplished and celebrate. I felt empty. And I remembered I didn't want it anymore. And I remembered at that point trying to sabotage. I still was driven because I didn't know any other. I thought I have to achieve this or I'm no good. I have to continue to try to, but I remember sabotaging opportunities because I really didn't want it. That night, sitting with dude at that strip bar, I didn't want it anymore. I only know that now. I kept pushing for it. But that night at Life Goes On, it was really eye-opening. And again, I was still blinded in denial, and I found ways to seek instant gratification, so I didn't have to feel what I felt on that stage. But that should have been happiness, right?
Have you ever read the book Stumbling on Happiness?
I haven't.
What you're describing, he goes into great detail about this. And tell me if I'm wrong, but before you got to that point, you're working towards being a famous actor, doing your movie and everything. And in your head, you have this picture and feeling of what it's going to be like when you hit that point.
That's going to make me happy.
That's when I'm going to reach happiness. When I get to this finish line that I got in my head and all these things, A, B, and C, are correct and done, I'm going to feel happiness and I'm going to be happy forever.
And that's it.
Then the line moves.
And then that's it. The line moves. You get there and you're like, okay, this didn't
Line
give
moves.
it to me. So then you get your
See
next
another,
picture. And it's like,
and
well,
another.
I'm here and now I have the money. All the other guys are doing drugs and banging hookers and stuff. I'm going to do that too. Because that's the new line. That's what's going to
That's
happen.
kind of like Tony Montana, like when he starts out, he's all gung-ho and he's doing all this
Yes.
stuff. And then you're like,
He's sitting there like,
And then
is this it?
yeah, at the bar, he's
Is
like,
this
is this
what it's
it?
about?
drinking, this and that, and like he had made it. I mean, he
Made it.
made it.
For an immigrant, right?
Right.
Yeah.
That
He
grew
got
up
to the
in-
point. He was the godfather. He had all
That's
the
it.
money, all the cocaine,
Yeah.
all the girls. He got everything that he wanted, and he's sitting there, and he was just
Miserable.
sitting there miserable.
miserable.
And that's what we all do. I think most humans, most of the people that I know anyway, get a picture in their head of their goal. And they say, when I do all these things, when
Then.
all the boxes are checked, I will be happy then.
Yeah,
Not now, not during the
because I
journey,
have to achieve this
but
first.
when I get there. And that is a huge problem
There's only
for
so
us.
many steak dinners
Because you're
you can
forgetting
have.
to be happy now. You're forgetting to be happy about when there's a nice dinner or when get a nice card from somebody or talk to somebody over the phone or meet one of your friends. You forget to be happy because you got to do these things.
Well, if you
I
base
was
it
to
on
get to
money,
the
if you
goal.
base it on money, it's going to be rough.
It can be anything, right?
You know, yeah. I mean, one of my boys, he had relapsed, and he's a self-made millionaire, and he had relapsed. And, I was helping him out and stuff, and it was funny. Like, he had a problem with money, spending money, and buying cars for whatever. And he told me one time as we was going to the gym, we were talking about business and stuff. And he's like, Sean, there's only so many steak dinners you can have. There's only so many times you can go to Cameron's and have the best steak. What do you do once you have the best steak and you have it 7 days in a row, and you have the ability to have it anytime you want to?
Yeah, it's true.
Like that will fade.
Then what?
And then it's usually like it's a car, or then it's the girls, then it's this, I mean,
And it's never you. It's
it's
never.
never
what's inside.
It's never just being content with the power that I was talking about earlier, like being cool with myself, knowing that that my God is with me, that everything's cool, we're just chilling, and I don't need any sort of external anything to complete me. Nothing external will ever complete me. I have to always remember that.
Yeah, I got into a little debate with somebody who she's pretty active on our page, and it wasn't a long debate, but she said, and then there was something about happiness. And we posted about happiness that it can't be found outside of yourself. It was something like that. I can't remember. But it's about what we're talking about. And she said, well, I disagreed. I found my husband, and I've been happy ever since. And I'm not going to rain on that parade, but I had to say, look, those things are, and I didn't say your husband's fleeting. Maybe you do stay together forever. But, if you're not prepared for he could die, right? Till death do us part. Then what? You're devastated.
He's taking lines off strippers' asses.
Which could happen. But the thing, man, it's not permanent. It's not permanent. And it's also not fair to do to another human being. Just put your happiness on them.
That's codependence.
It's complete codependence.
Yeah.
Well, depending. I mean, I don't know her
Oh,
situation
no, it
or
is.
anything.
Codependence. That is codependence. When now I've put my happiness on you, and in a codependent relationship, this nasty cycle of this back and forth, this victim abuser type scenario, to where if you don't perform this way, I feel this way. That's your fault. And if you're codependent as well, you believe that, so you work to try to fix that all the time. Meanwhile, you just don't realize that you can't make this person happy. You can only give them fleeting moments of happiness. You can give them a rose, remember the anniversary. You can,
Or you might be happy when you're together and things like that,
but not always.
Not always.
Not always. You're gonna have your bad moments,
right. I mean, it's a relationship.
right? And in that relationship, if you think you're supposed to be happy all the time, those bad moments happen. They get blown way out of proportion.
Yeah.
Now you suffer.
When I was younger, they used to fuck me up.
All the time.
When
Me
I
too.
was younger, I feel like I would watch my parents and they weren't happy a lot. So then I thought, like, when I got older and I started getting in relationships, like, wasn't like I didn't take it on as my job to make the girl happy, but I thought that we should be happy all the time. And like, I didn't really like conflict always like made me like fucked up.
What am I doing wrong? What's wrong with me?
I
I
remember
don't
like
feel happy right now. I must have done something wrong.
Or
Or
they're
she
not.
did something wrong.
or they're not
or
happy.
just like and then like it was just weird. It was weird in my mind. It's like ooh, like you work so hard at being happy, and now you have a conflict, like a fight or something, and then like I didn't understand like those things were okay. You know, I thought,
And
well,
normal.
like
Very normal.
dude, I remember. Well, I was like, I guess I'll have to pack my stuff and go now. Girl was like, what? I was like, well, I guess that's the end of it, you know. And she started
fucked up.
laughing. She started laughing her ass off. She's like, no, 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 no. Like we just had a disagreement. This is couples do this and stuff because like I just was like, oh well, you know, better grab all my stuff and go
All or nothing.
Yeah, yeah. You know, I'm out the door and she's laughing about it because like my skill set wasn't like, you know,
You didn't have the experience.
I didn't have the experience of that stuff. Like, you know, it was like first AA relationship, you know, like hang out for 5 days and then why don't you move on in and you know, this was like 3 weeks later and I'm like, oh well, get my stuff and starts laughing and shit. But
I got something to read when you're ready.
sure.
So what brought this subject up to me was the subject of happiness and what it is and how often we have it, but it was also tied into love because love is a huge happiness. Like if you do it right, you're in a relationship, you love one another, it creates happiness. Anyway, I read this comment on Reddit. It says, I'm in a relationship for the last 14 years, and what I have to say is love is amorphous. It changes what it is, and it's hard to pinpoint sometimes.
Emotion.
Sometimes you'll be mad at each other. Sometimes you'll share laughter and smiles and hugs and kisses. Sometimes you'll be underwhelmed. Sometimes you'll be bored. Sometimes you'll be full of pride and appreciation. Other times you'll be take them for granted. Sometimes the sex will be great. Other times samey, but life goes on. Can anyone truly say they are in love constantly and without interruption always? Or is it something that ebbs and flows?
We talked about that before you got here. So there's love is an emotion. Unconditional love is not an emotion. That's a different thing. Love ebbs and flows, like happiness ebbs and flows, like sadness ebbs and flows, like anger ebbs and flows.
Yeah, I thought you could like take the word love out of that and just put happiness in. It's the same thing.
An emotion.
Yeah, it's
all it
really
is.
amorphous. It changes as you grow. It's happiness is a different thing when you're a kid.
Right.
Happiness when your kid is getting a candy bar or doing good on a test or something. When you get older, happiness is a
And
little bit different. Yeah,
You know,
yeah, for
I-
sure.
I-
You
I
can
don't-
be content.
got money in my pocket yet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I find that happiness for myself is being content with a situation a lot. I like that. I like being content with
And
something.
content, and we were having this debate. Content, that's not fleeting. You can find contentment in your grounding,
Mhm.
and that's permanent. You're not going to feel that all the time, but you'll have a center to go back to. Where happiness is purely an emotion. It's purely an emotion. It's nothing more than that. And we confuse contentment with happiness. Contentment is real. Compassion is real. Those things are very real. And when you go transcendental in meditation, or you have your kids, or you fall in love, you get that real unconditional love the first time. When those things happen, that's different than the feeling of love. Completely different. Now, there's so many different things that I say I love now. I love them unconditionally. Conditions change in my life. I grow. You know, my thoughts change. The things I appreciate change. And I don't love that so much anymore. I don't love. I think I still love acting, but I don't need to do it. You know, I was very much attached to that, and I do love. I still love creating. You know, creating art through human behavior. I love that. I love it unconditionally. You know what I mean? Because what that took away from me to that grind, how that stole from my soul, and I didn't know that when it was happening. I just kept pushing because I thought I was supposed to, and I didn't want to be a failure. But what that actually took away from me, and I remember the first PTSD bender was in 2004, and it was after the first shoot of Life Goes On. It was the first time I ever experienced that thing where I was just gone for like 13, 14 days, and I didn't know what that was. And that deep feeling of discontent, loneliness, you know, it changed for me. It changed for me because it brought something different to me. And what I thought I loved, I didn't love anymore. You know, not, and if it's conditional, it's not love. It's not true love. Anything that is conditional can't be true love. It's not true compassion if it's conditional. So I think that's a good way to decipher whether it's happiness or contentment, because contentment's the only condition on contentment is how you feel about you, how deeply you've gone into yourself, and your ability to navigate through what life throws at you, which you have zero control.
I feel like the word love unconditional is something that the poets came up with, and it doesn't actually exist.
Oh, it does, and I know that.
With your kids, right?
I know for a fact.
There's a lot of people that are the mothers and fathers of multiple serial rapists and killers, and they can tell you that they do not love their children anymore because they're horrible.
That's not unconditional love.
Well, they would have said that they had unconditional love for their child until they found out that he was a serial rapist.
And they don't love unconditionally, because true unconditional love is taking a serial killer who beheads somebody and trying to find, rather than judging, because that's the gut reaction, that's a despicable act, but true unconditional love, the stuff that Christ talked about, the stuff that Martin Luther King talked about, the great thinkers, the great speakers, the great movers, the people that have stood the test of time, the unconditional love they talked about was that you love those people. You find a way to say, you know, somewhere in that beheading of this human being, this disgusting, repulsive act, it's a cry for love, like we were talking about, Marianne Williamson, Return to Love, is that you're crying out for love at a deep, visceral level. Your method of going about it is twisted.
I'd say that's her take on that. In the Course of Miracles, they would call that particular person's in separation.
Right.
They're separate from God. They're separate from their power.
They believe they're separate.
Yeah. Or
because you're not really.
Or even, let's say, they thought they were connected
in that way.
In like, well,
right.
You know, so, but
through acts of violence and hate.
Right. So, like, either way, like, you know, in the Course of Miracles, they look at that as like they're in separation. And, you know, once you are like one with God, one with the kingdom, love is the ultimate, you know, and that I'm coming with everything of love and compassion and service, and I'm removing my ego by removing judgment, removing conflict, and I'm doing all these things, and I'm moving through this particular life, you know. They just see those people who are, you know, maybe doing those acts, or the rapist or whatever, as that they're in separate. They're in separation.
That's why Steve's point is valid, right? Because it seems like I have to work to love unconditionally. I don't naturally feel any love towards somebody who does that, towards somebody who does that to a child, does whatever to a child. Like, there's no love. There's no love, the emotion there. But if I really want to walk that spiritual path, if I want to embody Christ consciousness, or what Martin Luther King had before I leave this earth plane, got to find a way to say, look, they did the best they could with what they had. And that's hard. That takes work, because we're not programmed that way, to your point. But if you listen to any of the great thinkers, the great speakers, the people that have stood the test of time, it's the only way to navigate the earth plane without suffering. You know, because if your existence is based on external conditions, how can you ever be content? Truly. I mean, I guess that's good to ponder, right?
Or why would you want to base all that on, like, this reality?
Well, you'd be codependent with your reality.
Because you don't control it.
Right.
You don't control it.
But you can change your reality through manifesting.
And you can't manifest if you're reactionary, right? You know,
I can't manifest if I'm separate.
Right, and you're separate if you're reactionary.
Right.
You're controlled. These things pull you rather than you being able to pull yourself out. I agree 100%. Right, we're getting the 1 minute mark. Anybody? And Clyde, I think I said what I need to say in closing. Anybody?
No, that was pretty good.
Rock it out, man.
Real good.
Yeah,
So I'm going to go try to be happy.
There you go.
Happy with that move. Yeah. But okay, that's the human condition. Keep your comments coming. We forgot to give you the address, but those of you who continue to watch and know it. Ideas for shows, we love them.
We'll be having a website soon.
Yeah, that'll be up. A lot of changes coming. Thank you.